SRAM's new Eagle drivetrain is probably the worst kept secret in mountain biking right now. Last summer, there was an MI5 dossier's worth of spy shots of a new Blackbox drivetrain floating around from the World Championships in Liège. And in the final event, Nino Schurter clutched victory from the jaws of defeat after a dramatic crash on the secretive transmission. So while you've probably heard about the new drivetrain, seen some pictures and maybe even read some speculation about the more obvious features, there's a whole lot more depth and detail that deserves additional airtime. Which is why I'm going to highlight 10 hidden features of SRAM's new Eagle transmission. Before I start, let's go over the main developments that make this arguably the biggest step forward in mountain bike transmissions since the original XX1 Eagle was launched 10 years ago back in 2013. Just as the original XX1 provided the final nail in the coffin for the front derailleur back in 2013, so the latest Eagle has put the humble derailleur hanger on life support. Designed to be the Achilles heel of the drivetrain, the Mech hanger's soft, malleable construction is the root cause of around 50% of poor shifting issues. And because it's available in a gazillion different designs, it can be a nightmare finding the right one for your bike if it gets damaged. Now, SRAM launched the universal derailleur hanger back in 2019 to help counter this, but what very few people knew back then was that this was merely a prelude to something much bigger. In effect, it was a bit like a Trojan horse intended to form the foundation of a stronger, more accurate interface between the frame and the derailleur. So while brands were shown the UDH back in 2019, it wasn't until a year later that SRAM revealed the truth about what it was up to. And this is the result. A derailleur that is coaxially mounted to the bolt-through rear axle and sandwiched around the frame, creating an exceptionally strong, super stiff interface that's compatible with any frame currently running a UDH. So strength is the most obvious advantage of the new design, but the other massive benefit is that there is now a precise relationship between the derailleur and the cassette. Because they are now in a known position relative to each other, there is no need for any form of conventional adjusters to make the gears work perfectly. That's right, no limit screws, no chain gap screws, and being wireless, no cable tension adjustment. And no need for this tool, which is a Mech hanger straightener, and either of these tools, which are the SRAM chain gap tools. Getting set up with a new Eagle drivetrain is ridiculously quick and simple. You only need 3 tools and there is no need to make any further adjustments once it's up and running, which is quite frankly amazing. And to show you just how easy it is, earlier on I installed this drivetrain on my bike and left the clock running while I did it. So I'm going to jump in here and show you the one bit of the job that is specific to your bike. To set up the chain gap on a full suspension bike, you no longer have to get someone to adjust the screw while you're sitting on the bike to account for sag. Instead, you can do it in the work stand. So first get the chain onto the red marked sprocket here, which is the 21. Now you want to lock the derailleur cage into a special new position. Like that. Now there are 2 options for this position depending on your frame design and how much chain growth it has. Most of them will be in position B. Then run the chain onto the sprocket indicated by the red spacer. So we can see the derailleur is free to rotate. We pull it back until the chain is taut and then we tighten up the main bolt to 25 Newton meters. And that is job done. One of the obvious concerns I had when I heard about the new system, and I'm sure you do too, is that it does away with the sacrificial part of the frame, namely the Mech hanger. Now, no one wants to destroy their frame or a part of it because you've hit a rock with your Mech or you've slid out in a corner. Well, SRAM are extremely confident in the strength of the derailleur and its ability to withstand the rough and tumble of mountain biking. We can probably all remember Nino Schurter laying it down on the drive side of his bike in a corner at the World Championships last year, then jumping back on to take the win. That was a very public display of the new system's strength advantage, as a traditional derailleur would have almost certainly been knocked out of alignment at the very least. And so far in my time with the drivetrain, I've had my fair share of crashes, and the shifting is still as good as it was on day one. I've also seen it in the torture lab at SRAM HQ being subjected to some horrific tests where it's repeatedly swung against a metal edge. And if you're still not convinced, there's a little party trick the engineers like to do where they lay their bike on the ground and stand on the back end. Now I'm sure someone somewhere will manage to break one, but SRAM has also made sure the new Eagle is easily repairable. For example, the whole cage assembly just unscrews from the parallelogram. You can replace individual parts of the cage assembly, and you can replace the skid plates on the Mech itself. SRAM has also made the most vulnerable parts silver, so scratches won't be so obvious. There's a breakaway clutch that allows the Mech to move out of the way if it strikes a rock, stump or something else immovable. And the teeth on the pulley wheels can rotate on the Spider, so if a stick gets caught in the spokes, the chain can still go round and hopefully you won't end up with a mangled drivetrain. Those jockey wheels are also larger than before. More teeth and a larger diameter means the chain has to articulate less, which reduces friction. Moving away from the derailleur itself, there have been significant updates to the Eagle cassette as well. The lowest ratios have been tweaked to give a more even spread of gears, with the old 36-42-52 replaced by a 38-44-52. All but one of the sprockets use an even number of teeth, which means by adding alternate profiles, a bit like those found on the X-Sync chainring, SRAM can force the chain to wrap around the cassette in a certain way. This means it knows where the outer and inner links of the chain will be on any given sprocket, so it can precisely map the placement of ramps that allow the chain to shift between sprockets. Within the electronics, there is also a built-in single shift delay, so you can punch the button as many times as you want, but the Mech won't try and shift multiple sprockets in one movement, which can cause derailment and accelerated wear. Now, this is an especially important feature on an e-bike. There's also some technology borrowed from the roadside. SRAM's new cassette is 1.85mm wider than the old design, which of course means it's not backwards compatible, but it does mean that the sprockets are very slightly thicker, and more material means they should last longer. And yet the new cassette is also around 15 grams lighter than the old design. To go with the new cassette, there's a new chain, also derived from SRAM's road bike drivetrains. Because the chain is narrower externally but wider internally than previous Eagle chains, the flat top design adds material back along the upper edge, which helps to strengthen each individual link. The rollers are also larger diameter, which helps keep efficiency high. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll realise that the narrower chain and larger rollers also mean that the new Eagle drivetrain must use a new chainring. There are various designs available to match up with the specific cranks and applications, including this e-bike crank with a nifty built-in spacer called a gap cap, a rather lovely new forged alloy exo crank, and optional bolt-on bash guard segments and Quark power meters. The final piece of the puzzle is the new AXS shifter. The focus here is on cost saving while retaining functionality and improving ergonomics. Compared to the old AXS units, the new controller is much smaller and lighter, and instead of specific left and right designs, it's ambidextrous. You can choose to mount it to the brake lever with a matchmaker mount, or you can use these new infinity clamps. These have 22.2mm diameter bores at both ends, so it doesn't matter which way round you mount them. So I hope that gives you some insight into the level of engineering thought and detail behind this latest SRAM drivetrain. As you can see, I've had one on my bike for the last 5 months. My plan is to do a video shortly going through my first-hand experience, so do keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, let us know in the comments if you have any questions about the new drivetrain. Thanks for watching.